welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. It's finally the dress form episode. I've been talking about doing this for over a year, and the reason I was kind of hesitant to tackle it is I knew it was going to be time consuming, and it is, it turns out. This is going to be at least a 2-part episode, so you're going to see a lot accomplished, but not really like the beautiful fun stuff. This is kind of just like the how to do it. A couple of the reasons, aside from knowing it was going to take a long time, why I've been hesitant is because there are a number of methods I've seen out there. So I would only want to do an episode if I was bringing something kind of original to the table. And I think I figured out like a really inventive, cool way to do this. It's dirt cheap. It costs about as little as you can spend on these. It's massively time consuming, but the end result is something you're going to want to keep forever. It's not just some sort of thing that's going to hold up for a couple years. In theory, this could last a lifetime. So with that said, let's begin. Our first step is going to be to tape some cardboard to a flat surface and enlist the help of either a companion or a captive. It's very important to wear heels at this point at a height that you normally would for a special occasion, because we want this dress form to be pretty much at the standard height that you would be when you wear like a gown or a dress. It's also incredibly helpful to, at this point, be wearing your favorite undergarments, whether it be a girdle, a corset, as it's really going to improve the silhouette of the finished dress form. If it should happen that your paramour doesn't have the steadiest hand, at this point you can go back in with a Sharpie and sort of smooth out those lines. Once you are very happy with your outline, remove it from the wall and lay it down on a cuttable surface. Using a very sharp blade, begin to cut it out. Now, I'm going to be focusing on the arms in the next episode, but this episode is predominantly about the torso and main body, so you can just cut those out and set them aside for now. Now that we're happy with how our outline is looking, we're going to take a ruler and cut it off just below the knee. This is an amazing delineating mark when you are making dresses, and our stand is going to be coming right up to this point. Hold on to that bottom part though, because it is still going to be important. Okay, so now that we have an outline cut out, let's talk about the total cost of this project. Of, the different options on how to create these, I think this is the cheapest as far as creating something that's actually going to last a long time. So with absolutely all of the supplies, including the tools to create this, you shouldn't need to spend any more than $200. It'll actually be a bit less than that. So, and the reason for that is because the cardboard should theoretically be free. If you are not somebody who orders a lot online, you can always ask a neighbor or ask some friends, but it should be pretty easy to get. So with that said, let's start cutting these out. I found that the average cardboard box was pretty perfect for this once you dismantle it and lay it out. When you see those gaps that go along the sides, you want to take some painter's tape and tape the front and the back. We're actually going to be removing these before we actually start gluing it together. But in the meantime, it's just very helpful in keeping the cardboard to lay correctly. It's important to try to remove all of, like, if there's packing tape, big sticky labels, anything like that. Essentially what you don't want is sticky glue adhesive-y things that are going to sort of muck up the tool that we're going to be using to carve away at this. Now comes the not terribly fun part of laying that outline down on so many other sheets of cardboard, tracing it out, and beginning to cut it out. You're gonna need, I needed honestly about 60 of these, which seems like so many, and it is. I actually enlisted the help of my captive at one point to start cutting because my wrist was just killing me so badly. So knowing that this is the worst part of the project, it will take you a few days, but once it's done, it's behind you. Something also a little bit disappointing to learn is the stack will look very big before you glue it together. So it's an illusion that you've gotten further than you have. So make more than you think you're going to need, essentially, is what I'm saying. The sort of nice thing is that for parts of your bodies that stick out the furthest, you can just make smaller panels to glue together, and that will save your wrists later when you're carving this thing out. I'm now ready to insert the stand. Where do you find these? We bought this house furnished and there was a couple of them already here, so I didn't spend anything. You should be able to find these everywhere, at thrift stores. I think Home Depot even sells them for dirt cheap. Wood is the best option, and a square shape is going to mold really well into this, so shoot for that. In the second episode, I'm going to be doing a ton of decorative stuff to this, so it's not really going to look the same anymore. If you don't plan on tackling that part of the project and you want it to look pretty on the bottom, hunt around and find something a little more decorative on the bottom, but it shouldn't be too difficult. And so let's glue this all together now. That section that we cut off earlier below the knee, now is when you're going to need it. You want to stand it up sort of flush with the stand and mark it with a Sharpie all the way around, and then that way you know exactly where your dress form should be landing. Once you know where your dress form is going to be sort of laying against this, you don't need the stand to be too tall, so just above the breast you should probably just cut that part off. Now you're going to want to lay that stand down perfectly vertical along the dress form. If it's a little bit cattywamped, your dress form is going to stand at a bit of a tilt. So use a ruler and make sure that it's as close to perfect as you can get it. This first one is just our trace, and so you want to leave a little bit of a nugget down at the bottom because you don't want it sort of distorting or changing its shape at all when you're laying it down on the others. Once you've done that, you can lay it down on just enough of our other cutouts to match the depth of the stand. I think the stand is about 3 inches deep, so you won't need to cut this out on any more than that. Now that we are just about ready to glue this thing together, remove any of that painter's tape that you applied earlier. Now what you'll need is a wallpaper adhesive. This is 1 gallon from Lowe's. It was $20 and it was more than I needed for the entire project. So now let's start gluing these sheets together. Using a chip brush, you want to paint on a pretty generous layer. You don't want to add so much that the glue is oozing out, but you also don't want to be so sparing that the glue dries before you can, apply the next layer. I stopped at about every 4 layers and just used everything I could find to weight it down while it cured. So this is a project that requires massive amounts of patience. So when you're gluing these together, you want to let them have as much time to cure as possible. Because it's cardboard, there's these vents on the side. Set up sort of a fan oscillating, hopefully, that kind of moves the air and keeps it flowing through the cardboard. And if you can feel the air blowing out on the other side, it means you've got it in the right position. This is just going to help it dry out faster. I spent days, gluing sections together, letting it cure, other sections together. I feel like if you try to glue it all together at once, you're going to end up with too much moisture in the center, and that really isn't what you want. So know that this is going to take a long time and just brace yourself. With the remaining sheets, I split them nearly in half, about 60 to 40%. The 60% goes on the back because the back half of your body, if you look at it in profile, tends to have a little more depth and curvature to it. All right, let's take another little break to talk about something I have been looking forward to for forever. I mentioned that I got this big, amazing grandfather clock, and it arrived broken. It arrived in a way that, I know how to do certain amounts of things on clocks, but my knowledge ends at the part where you start taking apart the mechanism completely. And so I met Rachel Kilgore through Patreon. And she is a horologist, which is a clock restoring person who works down in Alabama under the business name The Clock Goblin. She came all the way up here and she is here now while I'm working on this project. She sort of brought her whole little shop and set up. She completely fixed the grandfather clock using all sorts of tools I never would have thought of. And she was even good enough to mend another one of my clocks. So Rachel Kilgore, the Clock Goblin, she has a Patreon page. She's amazing, and I just can't say enough nice things about her. So this is a learning process for me. I've never sculpted my own figure before. And when I think of the things that sort of stick out on my figure, I imagine like my chest and my rear, but I sort of didn't account for the fact that everybody has an abdomen and everyone has shoulder blades that stick out. And the depth of the front and backs of your thighs are a little more than you kind of would imagine at first. So as you watch this sort of happen, you're going to see me goof and start adding more. But if you are tackling this from, start to finish, figure those things out before you start sculpting, because you're just going to end up with kind of something that looks a little more seamless. To make the gluing process a little bit easier, I removed the legs and now it's time to put those back on. Wearing the bra and heels that you would normally for an event, mark your nipple points, and this, I can't even stress enough how it looks silly, but this is incredibly important to do, because this is going to be the point at which you start sanding down around and you never really quite take off that peak. This was about the point that I realized, oh wait, I have a stomach and I have shoulder blades and I'm not a cartoon character. So I had the captive use a ruler to sort of help me figure out how far those things protruded, and then added the right amount of cardboard accordingly. Okay, let's stop for a second. Could I chisel out this entire thing using my normal itty bitty Dremel tool? Yes. Do I want to put myself through that? No. So you can get larger rotary tools even at Harbor Freight for like $50. So it's not terribly expensive. The tool may not last you forever, but it will definitely get you through this project and a few more in the future. The tips are kind of on the pricier side. They're about $25 a piece online. But because we're carving away at cardboard, one tip should theoretically get you through the entire thing. So now that we have a better tool, let's continue. Wait a minute, something else I need to mention. Safety. You're going to see me sort of up my safety game as this goes along, because I start to realize you need a respirator when you do this. This is not a dust mask project. You need something that's gonna, really protect your lungs, because these particulates you really just don't want going in. Another thing, you wanna always have safety glasses in addition to a face shield, because if for some reason something came loose, something popped out at you, that's gonna protect you. And gloves, hearing protection, all of these things they seem kind of trivial, but as you go along, they're just really important. And because you're using really a tool that is dangerous, go slowly, take your time, and always keep both hands on the tool at all times. This thing can hurt you, so be very, very careful. And if you feel like you're doing anything that might be a little bit dangerous, just stop and take a break and come at it fresh, because that's sort of, I think, when accidents tend to happen. So just know that there is some danger here, and you do need to sort of be mindful of your body and just doing this as safely as possible. And when I say be mindful, don't wear loose clothing. I didn't quite catch it on film, but at one point, this thing takes a long time once you take your foot off the pedal for it to slow down and come to a complete stop. And I wasn't paying attention, and it actually grabbed a hold of these Santa pants that I'm wearing and got very close to my skin. So Wear tight fitting clothes that is thicker than pajamas. Keep your hair completely put away. So you might be watching this and going, I can't do this. This is too hard. The truth is, I had never sculpted anything in my life before I was like, I think 27 years old. So I don't know. It's sort of one, unless you sort of challenge yourself and figure it out, you don't know what you can do. And with something like this, it's really just, it's subtractive. So you're taking things away from the tip of your breast to your shoulder. You're going to be planing all of that off. And there's a good dip in the small of your back. And if you just know that this is going to take a while, this is not a quick done project, because hopefully you're taking your time and it's going to be something that lasts for a really long time. And then also, if you accidentally make a mistake, take out a big chunk or something, you can always hold onto the sawdust, mix it with some of the glue, and fill in anything that's like an accident. Just let it dry, and then you should be able to move forward. Another incredibly helpful tip I can give you is to set up a large mirror in your workspace so you can sort of constantly sort of check what your figure looks like in comparison to what you're working on, whether you need to take off a little bit more from the front or more from the back. And also just work slowly. There isn't a rush on this, and take your time. And here's where I realized my thighs had a little more depth than I had anticipated. Something I found useful to do was, try to create the shapes of your body just larger, and then you just have to whittle those down very slowly. And once it actually does start to take shape, you can break out a ruler or a tape measure and start actually measuring the form compared to your own body and figuring out how much more you need to remove in any specific place. And as it continued to get closer and closer, I started taking dresses that I had made that I knew fit me very tightly and putting them on the form, seeing where they were fitting and where they weren't, and then just continuing to take little bits away at a time. I made this really tight-fitting pencil skirt when I was a 26-year-old secretary, and I think it has lived its life and now it is going to meet its end, being used as a tool to sort of determine how much I need to remove from my hips and thighs. Now, you don't need to make your form as anatomically correct as I am, but I'm making it like this because personally, I want it to be the closest representation to my figure that I can possibly make, so that when I'm making clothing on it, I really know how it's going to look on me. And just a quick note, save all of your sawdust. We'll be using it in the next episode. If you are determining whether you want to make this thing a little too big or a little too small, I would err on the side of making it just a touch too big, because if you make something on it and you need to bring it in a little bit, that's very easy to do, as opposed to making something that's too small and then putting it on. And you gain weight, things happen as you go along, and you want something that is a little bit more flexible. All right, this is going to be where we call it a day on this portion of the project. I knew this was going to take a really long time. I didn't quite anticipate it taking a solid month to get to this place, but when you're filming, everything takes longer. So now is going to be the time that I actually start doing all of the finishing and then all of the incredible decorative stuff that I have planned for this. So I appreciate your patience. Another episode will be coming next month. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again very soon.